Why couldn't the chef cook the tree branch? Because he used a non-stick pan. Because I know someone's gonna ask, where can I buy branches? Where can I get branches? You can either purchase them or you can actually use outdoor branches, and I made a whole video on how to properly sanitize your branches for your chameleon enclosure, so I'll link that up above here and in the description box below. Branches are super important to include in a chameleon enclosure so they have lots to climb on, but it can be kind of intimidating and a little bit tricky to figure out how to attach those branches inside a screen enclosure or even a glass enclosure. So I'm gonna go over a few different ways that you can do that. So what I use are Dragon Strand ledges. These are made by Bill Strand himself. He invented these just for this exact reason. So if you buy a Dragon Strand enclosure, they automatically come with the enclosure. But the very, very, very cool thing is you can also buy Dragon Strand ledges separately. So you could have a ReptiBreeze XL enclosure and then buy the Dragon Strand ledges all by themselves. You could build a custom screen enclosure and then just buy the ledges to include in there. And so what you can do is put the branch onto the ledges and attach them with zip ties. That's what I do. I'll put 2 zip ties going opposite directions to crisscross onto the branch, and that makes it super, super secure. Dragon Strand ledges aren't only great for attaching branches, but they're also awesome for attaching pots, and I would 10 out of 10 recommend them. But if they're outside your price point, or you want to be a little more scrappy, or maybe they're not available in the country that you live in, that's totally fine. There's plenty of other different ways that you can attach branches. I actually reached out to you guys on Instagram and on YouTube for different ways that you guys attach branches, so I'm going to share those with you now. Thumbtacks or push pins are another way that you can attach branches. So you just put the branch on the inside of the enclosure, and then you'll have the screen sitting right here, and then you take the thumbtack or push pin and push it from the outside into the branch, and you can just do it on either side to hold the branch in place. You can also use zip ties if you have a screen enclosure that has bigger holes. So what you would do is you would take your branch, you use a drill and drill a hole through the branch. Okay, then you take your zip tie and you run it through that hole, and then on the screen you can poke the zip tie through and attach it on that end. If you have tiny hole screen enclosure, very similar to what I have here, then you don't want to use the zip tie because you'll end up having to poke a hole. Instead, you can use things like fishing line, floral wire, jewelry wire, picture frame wire. Those are all small enough that you can feed through the screen enclosure on the other side and then tie it off on the outside. Another great idea that someone suggested was to put magnets on the ends of the branches. So you could take a super magnet, I think they mentioned rare earth metal magnets. Just make sure it's very strong. Super glue that onto the end of the branch. You have the screen enclosure, and then you can put the magnet on the other side and go boop, and then they will be attached that way. Just make sure they're strong enough to hold the weight of the chameleon. But what's pretty cool with the magnets is that you could easily adjust the height of the branch. So I think that's a pretty nifty idea. Another one I heard someone suggest was to use eye hooks. You can screw in an eye hook, you know, like one of those little pirate hook looking guys, and then the aluminum frame of the enclosure you could attach another eye hook, so then you could have like two eye hooks like this. That would be cool. Another idea I saw was to use expanding foam. This would be great if you're trying to do like a custom background in the back of the enclosure. You can put in the branches while the foam is still wet. The only downside to this one, well, kind of two downsides. One, the branches are pretty permanent in there, like you're not gonna be able to move them around. And the other downside is that expanding foam is gonna take up room in the enclosure. So not my personal preference, but if you wanna do that, by all means. You can also use a wooden trellis, scaffold, lattice, something along those lines on the inside of the enclosure, because if you have that wooden frame, you know, like the crisscross, or maybe it's just sticks going along the outer perimeter on the inside of the enclosure, then you can use those as your fixation points to attach your branches to inside your enclosure versus having to even deal with the screen. So I think that's a pretty creative option that you can either build yourself or pick up at a garden center. I briefly want to touch on how to attach branches in a glass enclosure, because none of these options we've talked about so far would work for a glass enclosure. So some suggestions would be to use suction cups to attach the branches. You could also use silicone and attach the branch to the side that way, and then maybe cover it with a little bit of cocoa fiber so it blends in nicely. The advantage of using glass is that you can just like put the branches in nice and snug, either from corner to corner or side to side, just wedge it on in there. You can't do that with a screen enclosure because you run the risk of puncturing the screen. As far as attaching the branches to each other inside the enclosure, I like to use brown zip ties, and I will cut the ends as close to the branch as possible, and if needed, I will take a lighter and kind of burn the edges so there's nothing that could potentially scratch my chameleon. If zip ties aren't your thing, you could also use the twisty ties that come on bread, or the twisty ties that come with like toys, like a car or a Barbie, you know, that they like tie the toys to. You can use all those to attach your branches. So the point is you just really need to get creative, but I believe in you. So there's really just 4 big things when it comes to branches inside your enclosure. Make sure they can support the weight of your chameleon. Make sure there's no rough edges of whatever it is you're using to attach with your chameleon. Make sure there's lots of them and get creative, right? These are just some ideas. Let me know down in the comments below different ways that you attach your branches. You know, let's share ideas with other keepers and give each other different ideas. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe so you know when I post a new video. You can follow Neptune and all my chameleons on Instagram at Neptune the Chameleon. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye! Hi Stick, how are you? Hole, then you can, wow, drop my zip tie.